Welcome to our official review for Lil Durk's new studio album, Almost Healed. We actually just did a full live album reaction with our entire Patreon community. It was super fun. There was a lot of raw emotions throughout the entire track list, so if you guys want to check it out, the link is in the description. But let's get into this, all right? Because this is one of the biggest albums of the year so far for the rap genre. A lot of people were hungry for a big studio album, especially commercially. So let's start off with the artist performance. Where do you think Durk strived here?
I mean, especially after All My Life, people had high expectations for Durk because he was showing a lot of maturity with his pen. But going into the actual performance, I feel like there's a lot of highlights and a lot of lowlights. So I want to start off with the positives, okay? When it comes to certain tracks on here, like for example, Put 'Em on Ice or Before Fajr. By the way, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Is it Before Fajr?
I'm not sure.
It sounds like fucking...
We always get the pronunciations
Fajr
wrong.
sounds like Goldmember from Austin Powers. Like,
Yeah,
I am your Fajr, you know? Like, that's what I'm thinking about. But anyways, on those types of songs, you're getting that aha type of Lil Durk where he has this hardcore aggressive energy and he also brings in a double time flow, especially on Before Fajr. And you're like, wow, this is actually like the best bag that he can go into. Same thing with a song like Bout It, where he has this more drill-inspired flow and he's sounding super shouty and rowdy. This is where Lil Durk gets the most passion out of himself, in my opinion, and it kind of makes me think back to a song like Back in Blood, and I feel like a song, for example, like Bout It is maybe his best performance since a Back in Blood. But going on to the negatives, before I mention mine, what are yours?
Well, listen, this is my thing with the album, and I think it falls less on Durk and just the amount of tracks that you have on this album. I don't feel like he could carry a 21-song album, and I've been saying this the entire year with different trap albums, whether it's Trippie Redwood Mansion music or whether it's Lil Baby with It's Only Me. There's only a certain amount of runtime you could give a rapper like Lil Durk, in my opinion. I mean, people are probably happy with this track list and the way that he performed on it. Just in my opinion, there's only so much you could get out of Durk. He only has a certain amount of bags that he could touch upon. Example, like, if you go through the first 5 tracks on the album, Durk has these super concentrated and also well-calculated flows and deliveries, like you were saying, but as the track list progresses, in my opinion at least, he has a hard time following up with a lot of the stuff. So example, like on songs like You Got Him or even Grandson with Kodak Black, I'm just not a fan of the performances because it kind of leaves you sleepy to a certain extent. It becomes predictable and then you're left in the track list in a sort of limbo where you're like, okay, I kind of know what's coming on the next song to a certain extent.
It's predictable, and I feel like with this album, this was him like not selling out, but sort of going for the biggest commercial peak he can reach.
And he did so congratulations to him.
But not necessarily, because in order to do that, you need good hooks, and I feel like a lot of the hooks on here are repetitive and feel forgettable. Looking at something like Never Again or Big Dog, where he goes like, where'd you get that shit from? Where'd you get that shit from? Like repeated like 15 times over. It just sounds soulless, and you're left wondering, like, you know what? These songs would have sounded better without a hook at all.
That's very true. But you do get that on songs like 300 Euros, for example, where there's no hook at all. But it's not a good performance.
Because he's sort of like, he's playing catch up with the beat. That the tempo of the beat is too quick for him.
That's what I was going to say.
And that's the thing. Like, his whole rhythmic awareness is off, because that was one example. But for a lot of other tracks, it's as if he's like running away from the beat, where he's actually rapping ahead of it. So rhythmically, he was a bit all over the place. I also feel like there's certain songs on here, for example, like At This Point We Stuck, where he uses
really not good
this
either.
low vocal filter.
Yeah, it's not
that
good.
sounds horrendous. Also, his singing isn't that good on something like Drew Hill. That was another one where the singing just didn't fit. And yeah, bro, I commend his willingness to take the risks on here, but I feel like he only has one lane mastered, and it's that aggressive, hardcore, murderous type of cadence.
But you do get certain performances, example like All My Life on his first verse, where it's a lot more toned down. You see that he's trying to go for a bit more of a mature and meditative vibe with his performances and his deliveries. But like you were saying, it's a bit all over the place. There's not necessarily a cohesion there. And honestly, like, I'm not expecting like Andre 3000 vocal inflections from
the guy. He's
Durk.
Lazy, bro. He's even jacking flows at certain points. If you look at something like Pelle Coat, for example, there's a part where he raps like "They in Suburbans," and you're like, that's Roddy Ricch.
Yeah, but
you know?
I don't necessarily have a problem with that because everyone kind of borrows off of each other. But like on Pelle
when it's
Coat,
that blatant,
but I liked Pelle Coat. You see, like that was
a highlight.
That was
but
a highlight,
saying,
though.
Again, there was that instance where it's like he's jacking a flow. Okay.
Yeah, but you find that on a lot of different albums. So listen, I'm not going to stick. Yeah, I'm not going to stick it to him though. But for example, like you even go on to something like Big Dog, for example, and I was okay with the performance, to be quite honest with you. It feels standard.
How did you like him on the Morgan Wallen song "Stand By Me"?
It was okay. Like I think
sounded bored performing.
Because the thing is that like like you were saying, you listen to songs like No Auto Durk, and you're like, how is this Lil Durk gonna fit in with someone like Morgan Wallen who makes country records? And I don't find necessarily the chemistry was at an all-time great on that song, to be quite honest with you. It was definitely a weak performance. So I think for the artist performance, we could go mid. But Lou, you want to get onto the features?
Let's get onto the features because we had a stacked fucking feature list for this, guys. We had 21 Savage, we had Kodak Black, we had Juice WRLD, we had J. Cole, and a few others. But let's get started off with J. Cole because this was sort of the entrance into the album. And I really enjoyed Cole's performance. I think that he has the best verse on the entire album. Maybe I'm not a big fan of all the melodic sections that he has in there, but in terms of a writer's perspective, him rapping about how common it's becoming for rappers to lose their lives and how the media profits off of them losing their lives. I thought it was super deep. It was well delivered.
It was super original too, because you've never really heard that perspective from, like, let's say, a modern rapper. At least in my books. I mean, if you guys
you've heard it, but maybe not from Cole in a long time.
Yeah, not from Cole. If you guys could drop me an example in the comment sections, please do so. But I mean, for the most part, I think J. Cole definitely made the song. But you don't have Cole on this song. I don't think it's doing nearly as big as it did. It feels grandiose from Cole as well, because it's nice to see him connect with people like Durk, and it's nice to see him meet that middle point. So I think it was well calculated. How about Future on Never Imagined? You see, this is the thing with this type of Future, is that, like, when he's in, like, that lazy melodic bag, it just, you almost want to turn off the song for how, like, mind-numbing it gets to a certain extent. And I haven't been a big fan of Future's performances as of late on features, and this was actually one of my more anticipated ones, because I'm like, if he were to be able to meet, like, Durk's raw and dark energy, then maybe that could be a thing for this track list. But man, it just fell flat.
It was too low-key. It was very mellow, subpar melody, subpar flows, and it just sounded like the worst version that you could get a Future. Like, not Hendrix's version, but like some of the melodic cuts off of I Never Liked You, for example, made me think about this feature. So that definitely wasn't a highlight. But let's talk about the Juice WRLD feature, because that's one that's getting a lot of people talking on across the globe. And this was an interesting one just because although I did like Juice WRLD's infectious hook on the track, I was just left wondering, like, Lil Durk has under 30 seconds of runtime on this song. Like, it sounded like a vaulted Juice WRLD song that they just threw on there because it was going to make some money and get some streams.
But you know what? But the thing is that I do have to give credit to the Juice WRLD feature, because it was actually really well done.
It was good.
The chorus is super sticky. He also has a really nice verse on there. So while I do agree with you, it doesn't necessarily have place on the track list. Fuck it, give it to me. You know, I'll take it at this point. But let's talk about Morgan Wallen on Stand By Me. That was another major feature. I think this song's going viral right now, and Morgan Wallen is obviously one of the biggest artists in the industry right now, and I guess it's nice to see him collaborate with Lil Durk at this point. It's just that, where the fuck does Morgan Wallen fit into this track list, you know?
Yeah, I mean, they did Broadway Girls together, and that was a big hit, so they tried to sort of replicate that formula, I guess. And I mean, he brings in, like, that signature pop country drawl that he has, and it's a decent performance, bro. It's not a bad performance.
I know it's not a bad performance, but it's like, where does that stack up against Kodak Black, 21 Savage, Future, and J. Cole? But
I have a gripe with you to talk about, just because you weren't too happy about that 21 Savage feature in the reaction. So did it grow on you? Because this is one of the best fucking verses on the whole album to me.
I think it's cool. I'm not gonna lie to you.
I'm not saying the bar's high.
Like the bar's not high, but I mean, like, you were overrating it in the live album reaction.
No,
you were saying,
this
is one of the craziest,
bro,
like,
he
verses
smashed
from 20.
It, bro.
It was okay. It was so
that
subpar
menacing
for
delivery, bro. No, he went
cool.
in.
I'll say it's cool. It's nothing like an umbrella that you're getting off of Heroes and Villains. Obviously,
not all-time great 21
but you were saying, like, bro, this is crazy. Would have been the best performance on Heroes and Villains.
Because I was getting a bunch of, like, lazy Durk performances up until that point, you know.
No, at that point in the track list, like, he was still on a pretty good, strong
You're
run.
right. It was still earlier on the track list, but I just feel like when you have Durk and 21 side by side on a track, 21's going to stand out. But apart from that, we also had Rob 49, who had a cool performance on Same Side. We also had
Kodak Black on Grandson. How did you feel about
Kodak
that?
Black on Grandson.
That was a cool feature. That was
was a great feature again,
like,
bro.
that Kodak bounce is pretty cool.
That,
I like
that OG Kodak flow, and he even makes reference to like Skrilla through the interpolation.
Like that little Big Punk sort of flow that you like from Kodak Black. So that was a W in my books. But for the most part, I think the features were good. Nothing too crazy.
Buka 600 had the worst performance, though, on the song Sad Songs.
Yeah, you didn't like it?
Bro, it was like a cheap attempt to try to sound like that melodic Hendrix Future, and the auto crooning was awful. But going back to what you were saying in terms of the feature list, it was good.
It wasn't anything too crazy.
It was nothing crazy, though.
You know, if people wanted to go great with it, I could understand why. But for the most part, I just think that you did have your misses. But for the most part, it was cool. Nothing too crazy. But look, you want to continue with this?
Yeah, let's go into the content now. And this is interesting because when this album starts off, we have this setup because we have Alicia Keys
That
who's
starts off the
speaking
album.
to Lil Durk as if they're in a therapist's office, and what ends up happening is that, you know, Alicia Keys is sort of summing up what Lil Durk's life has been like in the last year in terms of him losing King Von, him losing his brother, him dealing with rap beef, and she's sort of setting it up in a way where it's like, you know, your voice is the only one that matters in this room.
This is a safe space.
Express whatever
Yeah.
you have to express, and automatically you're thinking, okay, this is going to be Durk confronting his grief all throughout this album. Like, they're setting us up for that narrative, and it does not end up becoming fulfilled. And that's what's so frustrating to me with the content on this album, is that maybe you have moments of it on something like Pelle Coat where he's getting deep and introspective, and a few other tracks, but for the most part it's Durk rapping about the O-Block experiences and spinning the block and giving us more of the same that we're used to from him, and not showing that mature and artistic growth that we wanted to see here.
Well, that was the one gripe that I had within the live album reaction off of first listen. Like, we were expecting to be able to get like this full studio album experience where Durk is getting introspective. And listen, even if you wanted to include those types of harder tracks, right, sprinkled in throughout, I understand, you know, you have a fan base to please and it's Lil Durk. He's not going to create a crazy concept record. But the thing is that if you only get it for 3 tracks on a 21 song track list, where are you going with the album? And that was the issue with me, was that like the content was counterintuitive to the vision of the project. Like, the whole thing was almost killed. Even if you, let's say, go to the Apple Music description of the album, Durk talks about how, you know, he wants to take a step forward in his life and how he wants to kind of portray himself in a different image. And that was something that he was talking about on All My Life. And then you get 20 tracks practically full of, like you said, spinning the block. And I know Auto Durk, and
That's what I find odd, is that, like you
Yeah.
said, bro, it's super contradicting, because he's like with songs like All My Life and even a couple of other cuts later down the track list,
Yeah.
he's rapping about, in certain instances, wanting to be a role model for his community and, you know, paying for funerals and really, you know, sort of being a leader.
And I love that
And
content matter. Yeah.
I love that content matter, but he just switches up for the majority of the album and is actually rapping about
The opposite,
the
the
stuff
opposite.
that he's actually promoting on a couple of tracks, and it doesn't add up.
It does not add up. And
So-
listen, as I said, I guess it makes sense if you were to do it for a couple of tracks, but for the majority of the album, that's really what it is. And I
Bro,
mean,
you want the youth
it's just
you
tough.
want the youth to stay out of the streets, and you're rapping about being in the streets and being in the trenches.
And it's
you
hard
know?
because I guess maybe the approach was with the album was to be able to have a compare and contrast game where
Yeah.
Lil Durk was maybe being reflective on certain tracks, like you said, on a Pelle Coat or All My Life, and then he was going to double down on that with, let's say, going into more of the deeper stuff and more of the violence, but it just completely outweighs the rest of the track list. And that gets me wondering, is like, okay, if you wanted to go into a completely different direction with the content matter of this album, I salute you. Hats off
Yes.
to you. I think that's a big
And
W.
al-
But if it's not
also-
fulfilled, it doesn't make for great content.
And apart from like the overall message just sort of being tampered with, I would also say that you also have a bunch of random bars throughout the
Yeah.
bangers on here. For example, on Put 'Em on Ice, you'll find Bottega Slides, I Love Pretty Feet. Or 18 million for one tour. I'm so humble, I ain't even announce it. Bro, you just announced it.
I know. And that's the
Or
thing.
on Sad Songs, I'm a walking orgy. What does that mean?
Yeah, there's Cialis bars in here. There's a lot of like mishaps as far as like the one-liners go, and it almost feels to a certain extent that like maybe he was trying to fill up some bars on the verse. I'm telling you, the detriment to this album again was the runtime. Like, when an artist has too much to fill up, for example, right? Like, think about you, for example. Like, you know, artists can't wake up and just say, oh, I'm going to create a masterpiece of a writing album with 21 songs. That's fucking hard to carry. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Now, you have to carry that for an entire track list. No kidding, there's going to be filler here, or let's say those mishaps within the actual content matter. It's just going to happen. It's the nature of the album.
I think the issue is that it's like, for the longest time, we've gotten those street anthems and records from Durk, and that's what his fan base loves from him. And even though maybe in his actual real life he wants to move away from all that, maybe he feels an obligation to still rap about that sort of content matter, because that's what brings out the energy out of him. On something like, you know, what's the song called with 21 Savage? Talk About It?
War About It.
War About It. Like, he's savagely addressing like the whole beef that he had in the streets with someone like Quando Rondo. Like, even quoting him, it was, go into the lyrics and you'll see what I'm talking about. But I just feel like he needs to play to a certain taste that his audience has from him and expectation. So maybe that's what it was, but nonetheless, I think the content ended up being mid.
Yeah, it was mid. If you go through the album, you'll find like all those bars that just feel like filler and feel super off-putting, and then the concept wasn't well baked out. It's just too long. Like, there's just way too many gripes that I have with this track list as far as content matter. But you know what? I will salute him in a certain extent because at least he tried for it. At least he tried. Like,
somewhat.
I'll give him that.
Failed attempt.
But there was a certain concept that was trying to be mashed out. But as you said, it did fall flat. You want to go into the production, brother?
Let's go into the production. And this is interesting because we got Chop Squad on here. We got Metro Boomin. We got Wheezy. Stacked fucking cast of producers. And this is one of the worst aspects of the album. I mean, the mixing and mastering is where I want to start with here because it was absolutely horrendous. You go to a song like Grandson, for example, and you have this snare that can barely be heard throughout the mix, and it sounds like that beat was made on 3 different softwares, bro, because you have certain elements that are standing out, others that are in the background, and then they come. It's just super disorganized in terms of a composition basis. So that was really hard to accept. Not only that, but when you go to a song like ATL Jacob's beat for Big Dog,
oh my goodness,
the clipping 808s on that made it so inaudible.
Because not only that, but they're just too loud. Like because I feel like for the producers, at least for the Aim for a Durk album, you want to get that hype energy, right? You want to have those big grandiose 808s and trap drums that are going to get the energy flowing. People are going to be able to play this in their car. But like you were talking about, that ATL Jacob production on something like Big Dog, brother, my headphones are almost breaking. Like, it's to a point where like the song's crackling, and I understand maybe a lot of kids don't necessarily go into the mixing and mastering and care that much. But listen, bro, when you and I sit down through a studio album experience, I at least want proper mixing and mastering. It doesn't make sense. It's one of the most important parts of an album experience. And when you go track per track, it almost feels like a soup. Like, you don't necessarily know where things are placed. The sonics aren't hitting right. There are certain aspects where Durk's auto-tune is just absolutely ringing off and you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So I felt low-key confused about the mixing and mastering. I'm like, bro, this album's low-key not even finished to a certain extent.
Yeah, and you're getting just a lot of, I would say, cheap guitar riffs later on in the track list on stuff like Drew Hill. And you have like just these basic piano trap beats that made me feel like I was listening to Hall of Fame by Polo G all over again. And this is nothing new for Durk. I mean, his production has sounded like this for the last set of solo albums that he's put out. But even looking at, let's say, some of the more unique beats, I mean, like in All My Life, take away that choir sample. It's a basic piano trap beat, bro.
That's it.
It's nothing special.
And it gets me wondering, like, maybe Durk has to hone in with one producer to be able to help him form something that's a bit better as a sound goes. But
and we thought that could have been Metro Boomin, and I know you weren't impressed by the Metro beats on here.
I wasn't, bro. I'm being honest with you. Like, they were subpar. Like, it wasn't anything. It wasn't, listen, they're not bad quality. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that you go to those actual tracks, and you're like, it's not moving me. And to be quite honest with you, like, one thing I love about Metro is his drums, and those trap drums doesn't feel like Metro beats to be quite exact. Like, that's the problem with the album, is that like Durk plays it too safe with the production, at least for the production selection, and I was just completely disengaged, bro. And as I said, the biggest issue with me with this project is the mixing and mastering. Like, I to a certain extent, I don't even feel like it was done. Like I said before, like they should have taken more time. And again, it goes back to what I was saying. When you have too many tracks, the quality control ends up getting ruined. Like, how do you expect to have flawlessly produced tracks when you have 21 songs on here to get out maybe in a couple of months? So that's why I wasn't necessarily impressed with it. I think the production was mid. But let's go on to the replay values. So, going back to his previous projects, how have Durk projects stuck with you? And like, do you ever go back to anything?
Oh, no, I'm really like not the biggest Durk fan, but I really enjoyed 7220, and there were certain songs off of that project that I did go back to after it had come out. Same thing with The Voice. There were a couple of bangers that I kept in rotation here and there, but when it comes to this album, it's 21 songs. I would say a good 15 of them are bloat. The highlights really come within that first half of the track list, more so from track 1 to 5. And to me, I feel like the experience that I got out of this was like, okay, this is a really weak, mediocre album, and I'm going to treat this like a rental. I'm going to listen to it 5-6 times, obviously because we have to talk about it, and give it back to the rental store.
Yeah, I don't know what to grab out of this project, to be quite honest with you. Even going on to something like All My Life. Okay, this was what was interesting. We were in like the States actually for content and doing stuff over there over the weekend, and man, so many people were playing this album in their car, and I'm like, you know what? Hey, at least if it's not for me, it's for someone
else.
It's for someone else, and people are going to enjoy this. So listen, I think if you're a Durk fan, you just got 21 songs. Choose what you will out of it, but for my personal rotation, man, there is not much coming out of here. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I mean, War About It with 21 Savage, maybe, if I'm feeling okay about it. Grandson with Kodak, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of the track, but whatever. I could see that making my rotation maybe at one point. All My Life with J. Cole, I'm going to go back to it to listen to it, maybe for material here and there if I have to include it in recordings. But for the most part,
I'm never picking it up again.
Yeah, I'm not going to go back into this track list all that much.
Absolutely not. So yeah, let's get into our overall thoughts.
Well,
with
what's
this.
the score for it?
Right, we didn't score it. It's bad for me. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah, the
replay value is bad.
And I think it's the same situation I had with Imagine Music, and It's Only Me. It's just that these are super talented rappers that just have a hard time carrying a long track list, and it just kind of fucks up the experience.
Yeah, it's just as of late that it feels like they're not album artists as of late. That's the feeling that I'm getting.
Well, just cut it down,
Yeah,
just cut down the album. But I get it's for the streams and the record labels
man.
are pushing
You're
for a
feeding
certain
an algorithm.
quota.
That's what it comes down to. And I think he did achieve what he wanted to. He wanted to put out his biggest album. He got that. Biggest single ever, All My Life. He achieved what he wanted to, and I think his fans, for the most part, are going to enjoy this. So I can't fault him there, but going into my overall thoughts, I feel like Lil Durk truly squandered a big opportunity to sort of deviate from his usual brand of street rap and actually do something that would show artistic evolution and show maybe a personal catharsis, because that's what was set up with All My Life and with the beginning intro from Alicia Keys. But we didn't end up getting that, and I feel like we're at a point now where we got another Lil Durk, that album that's bloated. I feel like he's regressing from 7220. He was sharing more vulnerable tracks on that album, and I feel like you're getting an album that has lackluster song concepts, lackluster flows, awful beats, and I feel like we're at a point, I hate to say it, that Lil Durk is just running into a wall. That's what it feels like to me as a listener.
I kind of feel the same way, if I'm going to be honest with you. This album was predictable to a certain extent, especially when I saw the number of tracks. Like, I'm just like, whoa, what's going to happen here? How do you carry out a full-fledged concept album when you're setting that up? That was the issue with me, is that the whole marketing rollout behind this album was going to be this grandiose, street album concept of Lil Durk finally moving on from his past and moving into a different direction sonically, and especially after All My Life, I'm like, okay, I might not be the biggest fan of this song, but at least it's a different direction. It feels good. I'll bump it. Then you get into the album and you realize, well, I just got tricked into saving this album on my Apple Music. And then you go through certain tracks, the mixing and mastering isn't properly done. It felt like it was incomplete. You get a decent feature list to a certain extent. So, I mean, that's cool. But for the most part, that's not going to sell me on the album. As you said, like, it just feels like there's nothing really to get out of it.
Yeah, it kind of feels empty for the most part. So I think overall we're going to go with a mid rating on Lil Durk's It's Almost Healed. But let us know in the comments, guys, how did you enjoy this album? What would you score it using our system? And as we mentioned in the beginning of this, if you guys do want to catch the entire live album reaction that we did to It's Almost Healed, you guys can catch that in the link to our description. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.